You're starting retirement savings late. Maybe you didn't prioritize it when you were younger. Maybe life got in the way. Maybe you're just now realizing the number in your account doesn't look like enough. But before you start panicking about being behind, let me show you something almost nobody talks about. The size of your savings account isn't actually the number that matters. It's what that number needs to do, and that's completely different. Because if you're 55, 58, or 60, the worst thing you can do right now is look at your account balance, compare it to some giant retirement number online, and decide you're already too far behind. You're not. But you do need to stop guessing, and that's exactly what James had to learn. James was 57 when he finally sat down and looked at his retirement account. He'd been avoiding it for a while, not because he didn't care. Honestly, he was nervous. He logged in, looked at the balance, then leaned back in his chair. That's it? It wasn't zero, it wasn't nothing, but compared with the numbers he'd been hearing everywhere, it didn't feel like enough. James started doing what a lot of people do. He searched online, how much do I need to retire? One article said $1 million, another said $1.5 million. Someone on TV was talking about $2 million, and suddenly James felt even worse. He looked at his wife. I think we're behind. She asked him, behind compared to what? James didn't have an answer, and that's when he realized something. He had spent years worrying about how much money he had without ever figuring out how much money he actually needed. That was the first thing he had to fix. If you're starting late, this is where I want you to start. Forget the $1 million number for a minute, seriously. Forget what somebody on TV says you should have. Forget what your neighbor has. Forget what some retirement calculator tells you before you put your own numbers into it. Start with one question. What will my life actually cost when I retire? James started writing everything down. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, car expenses, healthcare, travel, restaurants, hobbies, subscriptions, even the little stuff. Because here's the thing. A lot of people know exactly how much is sitting in their 401k, but ask them how much they spend every month. They have no idea. James thought he knew. Then he added it all up. He was spending around $5,000 a month. That got his attention. But Sarah, the retirement advisor he was working with, stopped him from assuming he'd need exactly $5,000 in retirement, because retirement spending can change. Maybe the mortgage will be gone. Maybe the commute disappears. Maybe you're not buying lunch at work every day anymore. But then there are other things: travel, hobbies, more time with family, and health care. So James went through everything again. After looking at what he actually wanted his retirement to look like, he estimated he'd need about $4,200 a month. Now he finally had a number he could work with. Not some giant number from a headline, his number. And that changed the whole conversation. But knowing your retirement costs is only half the equation, because James still had the same problem. He wasn't going to have a paycheck forever. So he asked Sarah, okay, where is that $4,200 supposed to come from? And that's where things started getting interesting. Sarah pulled out a clean sheet of paper. At the top she wrote, retirement income. Then she started listing James's potential sources: Social Security, pension, other reliable income, and anything else that could reasonably contribute to the household's monthly cash flow. James looked at the list. Then Sarah asked, how much of your $4,200 do you actually need your savings to provide? James paused. He had never thought about it that way. Let's say his estimated Social Security benefit is $2,400 a month. His retirement expenses are $4,200. His Social Security is $2,400. That leaves $1,800. That's the gap. And suddenly James was looking at his retirement account differently. He wasn't trying to make his savings replace his entire lifestyle. He was trying to figure out how his savings could help cover the gap. That's a much better question, and sometimes a much smaller problem. Now, James had another question. Okay, but I'm 57. I don't have 30 years left to save. True, he doesn't. But he does have something valuable, time. Maybe 5 years, maybe 7, maybe 10, and those years still matter. So James looked at his workplace retirement plan. Could he increase his contributions? Was he getting the full employer match? Could he use catch-up contributions? In 2026, the regular employee contribution limit for many 401k, 403b, and governmental 457 plans is $24,500 with an additional $8,000 catch-up, generally available for people age 50 and older. For workers who turn 60, 61, 62, or 63 during 2026, the higher catch-up limit is $11,250 for many of these plans. IRA catch-up contributions are $1,100 in 2026. Now, don't get hung up on the exact limits. The bigger point is this: if you're still working, don't assume your opportunity to save is over just because you started late. You may have more room to contribute than you realize, and if your employer offers a match, don't leave that money sitting on the table if you can reasonably capture it. James realized something. He couldn't go back to age 30, but he could make 57 through 62 count, and that's a very different mindset. But saving more isn't the whole answer, because if you're starting late, you need to pay attention to something else too: where your money is going to come from and how much of it you'll actually get to keep. James had always looked at his retirement account balance as if every dollar belonged to him. Sarah asked him, "Is all of that money actually tax-free?" James laughed. No, exactly. A traditional 401k or traditional IRA can involve taxes when money comes out. So the question isn't only, how much do I have? It's also, how much can I actually use? This is where Roth accounts and Roth conversions can sometimes become useful. For some people, moving money from a traditional retirement account into a Roth during a lower income year can make sense. But here's the catch. A Roth conversion can create taxable income, so you don't just say, "Everybody says Roth is better. I'm doing it." No, run the numbers. Look at your tax situation. Look at your current income. Look at what you expect your retirement income to be. And if you're considering a big conversion, get qualified tax or financial advice before making the move. Because the goal isn't to find the trendiest retirement strategy. The goal is to keep more of your money working for your future. Now, let's talk about Social Security. This one matters because when people realize they're behind, they sometimes make a decision out of fear. They think, "I don't have enough saved, so I'll just take Social Security as soon as I can." And sometimes claiming early may be the right choice, but it shouldn't be an automatic choice. Your decision depends on things like your health, your spouse, your other income, your savings, your expected longevity, and how much you actually need each month. For people who reach 62 in 2005 or later, delaying Social Security beyond full retirement age can generally increase the benefit by 8% for each full year of delay, up to age 70. But here's what I don't want you to hear. Everyone should wait until 70. That's not the lesson. The lesson is simple. Don't claim because you're scared. Make the decision because the numbers make sense for your situation. James realized that his Social Security decision wasn't just another box to check. It was part of his retirement paycheck, and getting that decision wrong could affect him for the rest of his life. At this point, James had done something he hadn't done in years. He had stopped looking at retirement as one giant problem. He had broken it into pieces, but there was still one question left. What happens if things don't go according to plan? Because that's where retirement gets real. Sarah put a simple question on the table. What happens if the market drops right after you retire? James thought about it. Then she added, what if healthcare costs more than you expect? Another question. What if you live longer than you planned? Another. What if you have to retire earlier than you wanted? James went quiet, because this was the part he hadn't considered. He had been building a retirement plan for the perfect version of the future. But real life isn't perfect. Markets go up, markets go down. Cars break. Homes need repairs. Healthcare can get expensive. People live longer. Jobs disappear. Plans change. So instead of asking, "Can everything go perfectly?" James needed to ask, "Can my plan survive when something goes wrong?" That's what a stress test is for. You don't need to predict the next market crash. You need to know what you'd do if it happened. Maybe you keep more cash available. Maybe you adjust spending. Maybe you work another year. Maybe you delay Social Security. Maybe you change the amount you're withdrawing. The point isn't to predict the future, it's to have a plan B before you need one. A few weeks later, James sat at his kitchen table again. The same chair, same retirement account, same balance, but he didn't feel the same. Nothing magical had happened. His account hadn't suddenly doubled. He hadn't won the lottery. He hadn't discovered some secret investment. What changed? He finally understood what the money was supposed to do. He knew his estimated retirement expenses. He knew his expected income. He knew the gap. He knew how much more he could potentially save. He was thinking about taxes. He was thinking carefully about Social Security, and he had started stress testing the plan. Then his wife asked him, "So are we okay?" James smiled. "I don't know yet." She looked surprised. He continued, "But now I know what we need to figure out. And honestly, that's a huge difference. So if you're sitting there right now thinking, 'I started too late,' don't start by beating yourself up. Start with 3 numbers. Number 1, what will my retirement actually cost? Number 2, how much reliable income will I have? Number 3, what's the gap? That's it. Start there. Because once you know the gap, you can start making decisions. Maybe you need to save more. Maybe you need to work longer. Maybe you need to spend less. Maybe you need to rethink when you claim Social Security. Maybe you need to change how your money is invested. Maybe you discover you're not as far behind as you thought. Starting late isn't ideal. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. If you had the choice between starting at 30 and starting at 57, start at 30, of course. But if you're 57 today, that doesn't help you. You can't invest yesterday's money. You can't go back and collect the compound growth you missed. You can only work with what you have today. And that's where people get stuck. They spend so much energy regretting the past that they waste the years they still have. Don't do that. If you have 5 years, make those 5 years count. If you have 10, make those 10 count. If you're still working, use that time strategically, because being behind doesn't mean you're done. It means your next decisions matter more. And if this is the kind of retirement planning you want more of, subscribe. Because this channel isn't about throwing some giant retirement number at you and telling you to panic. It's about taking complicated retirement decisions, breaking them down, and turning them into numbers you can actually understand. And if you want to see what happens when someone thinks they have plenty of time until suddenly they don't, watch 5 Years Before Retirement 7, Moves You Can't Afford to Get Wrong. That's James's story. He thought retirement was still far away. Then his timeline changed, and he had to rethink the whole plan. You'll find that video on the end screen. And remember, starting late doesn't mean starting hopeless. You can't change when you start, but you can absolutely change what you do next. And sometimes that's where the real retirement plan begins.